is colorblindness viable? Can we just ignore race and then just move on as if everything's okay? All right, first bit of research. There's no real differences in racial discrimination when it comes to hiring over the past 25 years. And this was done off of what we call a meta-analysis, which just means they looked at the results of many studies and put it together. It's complicated. Take your graduate level stats class, and then we'll go more into that. But I'm just saying that this is done with a lot of different studies. No real difference. You know, the notion that, well, you know, it was bad back in the by and by, but now we've gotten better. Well, for the past 25 years, that's not the case when it comes to discrimination. A lot of these studies were done with what we call audit studies, where you send in an applicant that's from an African American or a Hispanic American, and then from a white, and then they see the callbacks, and they find that the whites are getting more callbacks. So colorblind, right? Next one. Have you all heard of driving while black? It means you're more likely to be pulled over if you're an African American driving, and the stats back that up. I mean, they've looked at sections of highways, and they look at the number of the racial makeup of the people driving, and they look at who gets pulled over more often. And what multiple studies have shown is that if you're an African American, you're more likely to be pulled over. It's called driving while black. It's not a myth. It actually is a factor. And of course, if you're pulled over more, you're more likely to be caught with something, more likely to go to jail or penalized. Just a really brief anecdote in my own personal life. When I was 17, I was pulled over by the cops because I was doing a newspaper route. And they were just checking me out. They were just checking out, saw I was a newspaper route. It was really early in the morning. I was like, and later on I thought, well, if I was a criminal, I'd been caught. But if they did it because I was driving while black, and I was a criminal, I was white, I would not have been caught. I'm not saying this is the only thing that counts for the differences between blacks and whites in prisons, but it is a factor. But colorblind. How about this? Resident segregation still impacts educational outcomes for people of color. When we segregate by race, and resident segregation has not really decreased that much over the past 10, 20, 30 years. We send people to different schools. I don't know how St. Louis is, but I reckon that they have black schools, mostly blacks, and white schools, mostly whites. And we know that schools of color don't tend to have the resources of other schools. And so it has an impact on your education. I actually went to a school that's mostly Latino. Just happened to be that way. There's other schools that are mostly white. I was fortunate to go to college because out of my graduating class, I went to a very local nearby school, only 2 other people went to college at that particular school. I'm sure some went to the other schools. I met a lot of students from the white schools who were going to my college. My high school focused in on industrial arts, building houses, not preparing kids for school. So resident segregation still has this impact. And finally, there's evidence of racism in the beliefs and practices of medical healthcare providers. Once again, this was done with a meta-analysis. I believe like 26 out of 37 studies showed that there was racist beliefs in their or practices in healthcare. And if you ever want to know what racism has to do with healthcare, Google Tuskegee syphilis experiment and go back and look at that. I won't go all into that. And I know that's a long time ago, but it just shows how our race can impact our healthcare delivery. But colorblind. So is colorblind viable? A viable way in which we can approach dealing with race today? Can we just ignore, these racial impacts and just say that was in the past, but now we're all good? Research says no. And research would suggest that this is not a way in which we can deal with our racial issues.